They told her she was disposable. That no matter how hard she worked, the rules came first. But as Rosa Martinez held her son's tiny hand and stepped out of that office for the last time, her heart burned with a question that refused to die: who gets to decide who belongs? The Houston warehouse smelled of old cardboard, worn dust, and stale vending machine coffee. Rosa had worked there for almost 2 years, hauling pallets, sorting boxes, breaking her back for a paycheck that barely paid rent. She was the kind of employee no one remembered until she was gone. A small woman with quick hands and a quiet voice, she had learned to make herself invisible. The managers liked that. Invisible meant obedient. But today, Rosa wasn't invisible. Today, they saw her. And they didn't like it. Because today, her 8-year-old son Nico was there too, small and shy, clinging to the strap of his backpack like it was a shield. His wide brown eyes followed every adult in the break room as if measuring their moods, terrified of making trouble. Rosa had no choice. Nico's sitter had cancelled, and there was no one else. She could not lose the shift. Rent was due in 3 days. The car was sputtering on its last prayers. So she brought him, promising he would stay quiet in the corner, a ghost like her. But ghosts don't stay hidden forever. The supervisor had found them. One sharp glance, one policy lecture, one write-up, and then the final blow: pack up your things. You're done here, Rosa. Now, carrying a battered cardboard box of cheap belongings, Rosa walked out past the metal detectors, Nico's hand curled into hers. The world seemed to blur around her, a swirl of scuffed boots, cheap fluorescent light, and the distant Spanish radio playing a love song that suddenly felt like a funeral march. All her efforts, all her loyalty, tossed aside because she refused to leave her child alone. In that moment, shame and rage twisted together inside her like 2 poisonous snakes. No one cared what she had sacrificed. No one cared that she had shown up day after day, overtime after overtime, ignoring the slights and the jokes and the casual slurs from coworkers who saw her only as the Mexican girl. It was the same story. Always the same. She belonged to the group no one defended, the ones who had to prove and prove and prove their worth until the day they slipped, and then suddenly the rules applied with brutal force. No empathy. No second chances. If a single mom couldn't find a babysitter, then too bad. If a brown woman looked tired or angry, then she was difficult. If her son needed a safe place to wait, then she was irresponsible. Rosa was sick of it. Sick of being treated like a problem instead of a person. As they passed the front office, she saw him. Jason McAllister. The owner. Younger than she had expected, maybe 30, tall, clean-cut, phone in hand, collared shirt crisp and expensive. He barely looked at workers on the floor, she'd heard. Why would he? They were numbers on a spreadsheet, a head count. But for one split second, their eyes locked. His blue gaze held hers, surprised maybe, curious, and then shifting. She didn't know what it meant. Pity? Guilt? Or something else entirely? Rosa forced herself to look away, tightening her grip on Nico's hand. She would not cry in front of the boss. She would not cry in front of anyone. She had been raised by her abuela to believe tears were a private matter, meant for a pillow, not the public. They stepped out into the late Texas afternoon, the heat pressing against their skin like punishment. Nico squinted against the sun, still gripping that crumpled drawing he had made in the break room. It showed Rosa with a sad face, and him next to her holding a little stick figure flower. Rosa swallowed hard, fighting a wave of nausea. This was the memory her son would carry of today. "Mama," he whispered. "Did I make you get in trouble?" His voice shattered her like glass. She crouched down, setting the cardboard box on the sidewalk, and gathered him close, smelling the faint sweetness of kids' shampoo mixed with warehouse dust. "No, baby," she said firmly, her voice steady even as her heart trembled. "You didn't do anything wrong. You hear me? Nothing. You're my reason, not my mistake. Nico nodded, small shoulders sagging in relief, but the shame was still there in his eyes, as if the burden of the world had been dropped on an 8-year-old's back. Rosa cursed a world that made children carry adult worries. She cursed it with every tired bone in her body. As she stood again, the heavy warehouse doors swung closed behind them, ending 2 years of struggle in a dull metallic thud. Rosa stared at them for a long moment, as if expecting them to reopen, as if expecting someone to say, "Wait, we were wrong, you deserve better." But no one came. Her pride burned in that instant like a live coal. She had always done things right. Always. Never late. Never loud. Always polite, even when coworkers made jokes about illegals and wetbacks, thinking she wouldn't understand. Always smiling so no one would suspect how close she was to breaking. And for what? 2 years gone with a single, cold decision. As she took Nico's hand again, Rosa felt an ache that went beyond money or rent or even food. It was the ache of being seen as expendable, a tool, instead of a mother, a daughter, a woman with a heart that beat and bled like anyone else's. Society had marked her with invisible ink, less than disposable. And it burned. They started walking across the parking lot, passing faded lines and puddles of oil. Rosa's cheap shoes squished on the hot concrete. Nico kept glancing back, eyes wide and confused. She squeezed his hand. He needed her to be strong right now. Then she heard footsteps behind them. Quick, determined. Rosa turned. Jason McAllister was jogging toward them, phone still in hand but now forgotten, his brow furrowed with an expression she couldn't read. Worry? Anger? Regret? Whatever it was, it made Rosa's throat go dry. He stopped a few feet away, looking from her to Nico and back again. There was a beat of silence that seemed to stretch a lifetime. "Ms. Martinez," he said carefully, his voice smoother than she expected, almost gentle. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Rosa braced herself, instinctively pulling Nico closer. Was he going to lecture her, too? Pile on more shame? "I don't think there's anything to talk about," she said, more sharply than she meant to. The words surprised her, but she didn't regret them. She was done apologizing for surviving. Jason hesitated, glancing down at Nico, who clutched his flower drawing like a prayer. Something softened in his eyes. He exhaled. "I saw what happened in there," he said finally. "And I think we handled it wrong." Rosa blinked. She wasn't sure she had heard correctly. "What?" Jason cleared his throat. "It was wrong. Firing you for trying to look after your child, that doesn't sit right with me." Rosa felt a bitter laugh bubble up in her chest, but she held it back. "Doesn't sit right with you? It's your policy." He nodded, taking the hit without flinching. "Yeah. It is. But maybe it shouldn't be." Rosa stared at him, stunned by the admission. Her experience told her not to trust the boss. The boss never cared. The boss was an island, untouched by their struggles. But Jason didn't look untouched. He looked human. And it rattled her. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, voice ragged. Jason looked at her, then at Nico again. "Because I saw your son's drawing," he said softly. "And because I don't want to be the kind of man who breaks kids' hearts so we can meet quotas." Rosa felt her knees weaken. Nico looked up at her, confused but hopeful. "I can't take back what happened today," Jason continued. "But I want to fix what comes next. If you'll let me." The air felt impossibly still, even with cars rumbling by on the highway in the distance. Rosa wanted to say no. She wanted to turn her back and leave. But a part of her heart, the part that still hoped people could change, ached to listen. "What exactly are you saying?" she asked, measured, guarded. Jason stepped forward, offering a hand. "I'm saying I want to talk. About how we can do better. For you. For other parents. For people who make this place work. Rosa didn't take his hand. But she didn't turn away, either. She stood there, Nico pressed to her side, staring at a man who had the power to crush her and had, in one snap of policy, already done so. And yet something in his eyes told her maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to. I can't promise anything, she said at last, her voice small but steady. I won't beg for a job. I can't. Jason nodded. I'm not asking you to beg. Just, give me a chance to listen. Rosa sighed, letting the weight of 2 years of exhaustion sink into her bones. Then she nodded, once, sharply. Okay. I'll talk. Jason's shoulders relaxed. He offered a small smile. Thank you. As they turned back toward the building, Rosa felt Nico slip his small fingers into hers again, still warm, still trusting, still believing in her. And for the first time in hours, she let herself breathe. Rosa never expected a second chance, but second chances come with their own price. And when the world still refuses to see your worth, you have to fight for it every single day. The next morning was already hot by sunrise, the air sticky with the promise of a punishing Houston afternoon. Rosa stepped carefully into the warehouse office, Nico's small hand pressed against her side. She had agreed to come back only to talk, nothing more. A piece of her still burned with shame, a deeper piece burned with resentment, the kind that doesn't wash away overnight. She could not forget the cold look on her supervisor's face, how easily they had erased her like a faulty label on a package. As they sat in a small meeting room with scuffed tables and a humming fan that barely moved the air, Rosa studied Jason across from her. His collared shirt looked out of place among the dusty clipboards and stained carpet. He offered her a coffee, and she shook her head. She'd learned long ago never to get too comfortable in rooms where other people held the power. Jason cleared his throat. I know you don't trust me, he began. I can't change what happened yesterday. But I want to understand what makes it so hard for parents here. Rosa looked at him, feeling the words bubbling up like lava in her throat. So many years of being told she should be grateful just to work, to exist, to scrape by. So many times she had been passed over for a raise, asked to stay late, handed the heaviest boxes because people thought she wouldn't complain. A brown woman, a single mom, no fancy degrees. She was supposed to accept whatever came. When she failed, it was seen as proof of her own weakness. When she succeeded, it was barely noticed. It's not hard for parents, she said finally, voice edged in quiet fire. It's hard for people who don't matter to you. Jason opened his mouth, but she went on, her courage building. You think we all have babysitters on speed dial? You think we have nannies? I make $8.50 an hour, Jason. My mother is gone. My sister's working 2 jobs herself. There is no one else. And when the sitter cancels, I don't have a backup plan. Her voice cracked, but she refused to look away. You know what that feels like, she continued. Walking into a building every morning where they look at you and see a problem. Where they think you're going to steal something, or make trouble, or speak bad English, even though you were born right here in Texas. I work just as hard as everyone else, maybe harder, and the minute I slip up, I'm trash. She saw Jason swallow, blinking. Maybe he'd never heard someone say these things in such plain language. Rosa had kept these words buried for so long, she didn't even realize how heavy they'd become. Nico shifted in his seat, eyes darting between them. Jason looked at him, then back at Rosa. I hear you, he said. And I'm sorry. Rosa wanted to believe him, but the apology felt too light, too easy. Sorry did not change her bank account. Sorry did not fix her son's sense of fear. Sorry did not erase the way people looked right through her every single day, as if she did not deserve to take up space. Jason leaned forward. If I let you come back, with flexible shifts, and a policy for emergencies like this, would you take it? Rosa hesitated. Pride clashed with desperation. A steady job meant food, the rent, keeping the car from breaking down completely. But it also meant swallowing the resentment, letting herself be vulnerable to these rules again. I don't know, she answered honestly. I don't want a favor. I want respect. There's a difference. Jason nodded. Then let's build it together. You tell me what would work. I'll put it in writing. It was the first time someone had asked her what she needed instead of telling her what she deserved. And that small shift, that tiny bit of dignity, was enough to keep her talking. For over an hour they spoke, Rosa describing things management never saw, how childcare fell through, how the overtime rules were impossible for single parents, how supervisors punished anyone who tried to swap shifts. Nico listened, drawing in his notebook, occasionally leaning on Rosa's arm for comfort. And Rosa spoke with a rising confidence she had forgotten she possessed. When the meeting ended, Jason stood to shake her hand. Thank you, he said again. Really? Rosa still didn't trust him completely. But something in his eyes was real. And she decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, just once. As they left the office, Nico tugged her sleeve. Mama, are you going back to work? Rosa sighed. Maybe, Mijo. Maybe. They stepped into the hallway, where some of her old co-workers were gathered near the lockers. Conversations died as they passed. She felt every pair of eyes on her, measuring, judging, doubting. Whispers rose like thorns. Rosa was used to it. She was always the one that didn't belong, too brown, too poor, too loud if she spoke, too quiet if she didn't. But this time she held her head up. She looked each one of them in the eyes. Let them see her. Let them see the fire that still burned in her heart, the courage to stand in a world that would rather she disappear. Her resentment was real. She carried it like a scar, a permanent reminder that no matter how hard she worked, she would always be fighting for respect others took for granted. And yet she would keep fighting. Because Nico deserved a mother who never gave up, even if society expected her to. Outside, the Texas heat slammed into them again, but Rosa felt a tiny breeze inside her chest. A sense of power, hard-earned and fragile, but hers. It was enough, for today. What if the system you trust to protect you was built to forget you? Rosa was about to learn just how deep those cracks ran, and how they could swallow even the strongest heart. 2 weeks after that uneasy handshake with Jason, Rosa returned to work. The warehouse hadn't changed. The same concrete floors, the same burned-out bulbs, the same sour smell of dust and sweat. But Rosa had changed. She walked in with her chin higher, no longer willing to shrink to fit their comfort. Jason's promised policy had taken shape, a small fund for emergency childcare, a flexible attendance note, and a printed statement posted on the break room wall about supporting family needs. The words looked nice. But Rosa had learned to read between lines. Policies were one thing, hearts were another. Some supervisors rolled their eyes. Some co-workers muttered she was getting special treatment. Rosa tried to ignore them, but the sting was real. During lunch, she sat with Nico on a rickety picnic bench outside. He picked at a peanut butter sandwich, drawing stick figures in the dirt with a cheap plastic straw. Rosa watched him, remembering every time she'd scraped together coins to feed him, remembering every night she'd stayed awake worrying. It didn't matter how hard she worked, she was always a moment away from losing everything. That night, back home, Rosa went through the stack of mail on the counter. Bills. Past due notices. A letter stamped in red about her public benefits review. It stung. She had filled out the paperwork on time, but somehow the forms had gone missing again. When she called the number on the letter, she waited on hold for 40 minutes before a tired-sounding voice told her to resubmit everything or risk losing coverage for Nico's health care. Rosa had heard stories of friends whose kids got dropped from coverage because the system misplaced a form. Another day, another stone on her shoulders. She hung up and sagged against the kitchen counter. Even with a job, even with Jason trying, the safety net was full of holes. A single missed letter could pull the floor right out from under them. A week later, she tried to get Nico signed up for a school tutoring program. They told her the list was full. When she asked if there was a waiting list, the woman behind the front desk barely looked up from her phone and said, "Try again next year." Rosa swallowed her pride and left without raising her voice. It felt like her life had been built from closed doors, polite but firm. No. Not for you. Then came the twist she never saw coming. Jason called her into the office late one afternoon. Rosa stepped inside, wiping sweat from her brow, worried she'd messed up somehow. He looked serious. "There's someone you should meet," Jason said, gesturing to a man in a suit, tall, with a kind of clipped politeness Rosa had learned to fear. The man introduced himself as Mark, a state labor auditor. Rosa's heart seized. Audits never meant good news for workers like her. "We're reviewing claims of policy changes here," Mark explained. "We're not sure these new accommodations meet state safety codes." Rosa felt like the floor had dropped away. The same system that ignored her struggles could still find a way to punish her for trying to fix them. Mark spoke politely, but his questions were sharp. Who authorized this? Was this applied fairly to all staff? Did any undocumented workers benefit from it? Rosa tried to answer, her voice steady but her hands trembling under the table. The shame came flooding back, because no matter what, she was always under suspicion. Always forced to prove she was worthy of even the smallest grace. Nico sat next to her, holding her sleeve, confused. Rosa wanted to gather him in her arms and run far away. But she couldn't. She had to stand her ground. Jason tried to defend the new policy. Mark's face stayed blank. Rosa saw it all in that moment, how a policy meant to help could become a weapon, turned against them by a bureaucracy that cared more about rules than human beings. When the meeting ended, Mark left with a promise to review everything. Jason looked defeated, staring down at the paperwork. Rosa looked at her son, then back at the door where the auditor had gone. "I don't belong anywhere," she whispered. "Not even here." Jason raised his head. "You do belong here, Rosa." But Rosa felt the old bitterness clawing up her chest again. "They'll find a way to shut it down," she said. "They always do." He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Because she was right. That night, Rosa lay awake, Nico curled against her. She replayed every moment of the last 2 weeks, every tiny hope and every heavy disappointment. The U.S. systems she depended on, the benefits office, the public school, even the warehouse, all of them seemed built to make her fail. And when she needed help, they pointed to rules, forms, quotas. It was easier to push people like her aside than to look her in the eyes and see a mother trying her best. In the middle of the night, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jason. "I'm going to fight this," it read. "I promise." Rosa closed her eyes, too tired to reply. She wanted to believe him. But she had spent her whole life learning not to trust promises. She brushed Nico's hair off his forehead, watching him breathe. That was her anchor. No matter what the world took from her, she still had him. In the morning, she rose before dawn. A new day, another battle. Rosa packed a small lunch, combed Nico's hair, and pulled on her worn sneakers. There was no time to break down, no time to crumble. If the system wouldn't bend for them, she would have to find a way to work around it. Before they left for work, she found the crumpled drawing Nico had made, the one of her with a sad face, the little flower next to them. She smoothed it out, folded it gently, and tucked it into her wallet. A reminder. She would keep going, for him. No matter what. When you think life can't take one more thing away, it does. Rosa was about to discover that holding on to hope could be the riskiest choice of all. Days blurred into each other, each one heavy with questions. Rosa kept showing up, clocking in with her name badge half broken, trying to move like she still belonged. But everywhere she turned, she felt the bite of suspicion. Rumors swirled through the break room that the state might pull funding, that jobs could be cut, that somehow it was her fault. That was the hardest to bear, how quickly people decided her humanity was too expensive. Each shift left her raw, like a wound that wouldn't scab over. Sometimes she heard her own name whispered in corners. Sometimes she heard the same stale jokes about lazy immigrants or welfare queens, even though Rosa had been born right here, working and paying taxes like everyone else. But the jokes were never for her benefit. They were weapons to keep her in place, small and silent. By midweek, she went to check on her application to renew Nico's after-school program. Again, a problem: the online forms wouldn't submit, and the office hours were impossible for a working mom. She tried calling, only to be bounced from line to line until the phone went dead. That was what resentment felt like, not a dramatic moment, but 1,000 paper cuts, 1,000 tiny humiliations from a system too rigid to see her as a person. One evening, Jason asked if she could stay late to help reorganize inventory. Rosa hesitated. Nico was at her sister's place, but she knew if she said no, someone would call her ungrateful. If she said yes, they'd say she was trying to curry favor. There was no right answer. Still, she agreed. That night in the warehouse, the lights overhead flickered, the fans rattled, the pallets towered like cliffs. Rosa felt dwarfed by the weight of other people's wealth, all these products, all this money, yet workers like her were one lost paycheck away from disaster. As she worked, Jason joined her, carrying a clipboard. They worked in silence for a while, the sound of boxes shifting like distant thunder. Finally, he spoke. They might freeze the new policy, he admitted. They think it costs too much. Rosa closed her eyes. Of course they do. I'm trying, Rosa. But they don't think it's the company's job to care about your kid. Her chest went tight, tears threatening to spill. She hated how much she needed him to try. She hated that a stranger with power had to choose whether her son was worth protecting. And she hated, most of all, that none of this surprised her. Tell me something, she said, wiping a dusty hand on her pants. Do they ever think about how many of us break ourselves for these jobs? How many of us stay because we're scared? How many of us get called disposable? Jason swallowed, the clipboard suddenly very small in his hands. I think some people would rather not see it. Rosa nodded. That's what I thought. She stayed late, finishing every box, checking every label. If she was going to be judged, she'd make sure no one could say she'd left a mess. When she finally left, the night was so dark the highway looked like a black river, its lights the only stars. At home, she found Nico asleep on the couch, still in his shoes, a small crayon drawing clutched in his fist. It was another picture of her, this time smiling, with a big red heart next to them. Rosa's eyes filled, the tears finally breaking free. Even after everything, that boy still saw her as safe. Still saw her as strong. The next morning, another letter arrived. It was from the school. Nico's free lunch program was being reassessed due to a random review. Rosa almost laughed. Another form, another hoop, another reminder that if you belonged to the wrong group, the world would always find a reason to question your worth. She took a breath and folded the letter, determined not to let Nico see her cry. Instead, she made breakfast and packed his lunch like always, adding an extra cookie as a small rebellion. Then she walked him to school, holding his hand tightly the whole way. In the yard, other parents watched her, some with curiosity, some with judgment. Rosa felt their eyes on her skin, cold and measuring. But she refused to flinch. If they saw a struggling mother, let them. If they saw a woman who refused to disappear, even better. At the warehouse later, the auditor returned with more questions. Rosa had to pause her work and sit through a fresh round of suspicions. Was she really eligible for childcare benefits? Was her son actually living with her? Was she abusing the system? Each question was like a needle. Jason tried to interrupt, but the auditor waved him off. Rosa answered, calm and precise, though rage burned behind her ribs. Her voice never shook, but inside, she was breaking. All these people deciding if her child deserved help. All these people acting like she was cheating, when she was only surviving. When it was over, Rosa stepped outside for air, her hands trembling. She felt alone in the deepest sense, like no one would ever stand between her and the next accusation. She wanted to scream, to curse, to demand why this country only believed in hard work when someone else was profiting from it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, she took a breath and walked back in. That evening, Jason found her cleaning up the last of the broken boxes near shipping. Rosa, he said, we got the green light to keep the policy, at least for now. Relief crashed over her, but so did exhaustion. They'll come again, she said. There will always be another test. Jason nodded, his face drawn. Maybe. But you'll have me on your side. She looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of a lie, but saw only resolve. And it mattered more than she expected. They stood there, two people from opposite worlds, trying to build something fragile and human in a place that wasn't made for either of them. Rosa held out her hand, and Jason took it. But just when Rosa thought she could breathe, a single phone call changed everything, a voice from her past, carrying news that would shatter what little peace she had left. Stay with us, because what happens next will leave you speechless. A single phone call can break open everything you've tried to rebuild. Rosa was about to learn that sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, and neither does hope. The phone rang just after sunset, a sharp sound that made Rosa jump. She was washing dishes, Nico humming in the next room, drawing superheroes in a tattered notebook. The call came from a number she didn't recognize, but something in her gut twisted. She dried her hands, heart already pounding. Hello. A pause, then a woman's voice, cautious, formal. Ms. Martinez? This is Officer Daniels with Family Services. We've received a concern regarding the supervision of your son. The words hit like a hammer. Rosa's knees nearly buckled. She grabbed the counter, trying to keep her balance. Concern? What concern? There was an anonymous report. We're required to follow up. Could we schedule a home visit? Rosa's mind spun. An anonymous report. Someone, one of the neighbors. A coworker. It didn't matter. The damage was done. Once a file opened, it was nearly impossible to close. And Rosa knew too well how a single accusation could swallow years of hard work. Her voice came out tight. Of course, she said, because what else could she say? Refusing would make her look guilty. After the call, Rosa stood frozen, water dripping from the faucet, the room spinning around her. Nico peeked around the corner, worry in his eyes. Mama? She forced a smile, though her insides were ice. It's okay, Mijo. Just, someone checking. That night, Rosa couldn't sleep. She kept replaying every moment, every late pickup, every night she'd had to leave him with a neighbor, every time she'd carried him sleeping from the car to their tiny apartment. Would they call that neglect? Would they call her unfit? She felt the rage boil in her chest, the same rage that had lived there for years, because no matter how hard she worked, how many rules she followed, she was never truly safe. The next day, the caseworker arrived. Rosa opened the door to a woman with a tight ponytail and a polite, distant smile. They walked through the apartment, the caseworker taking notes on her clipboard, glancing at Nico's small bed, the chipped kitchen floor, the cabinet stocked with cheap pasta and canned beans. Rosa felt stripped bare, exposed. Every dent in the wall, every stain on the counter felt like an accusation. Nico stood quietly, clutching her shirt, sensing the tension. The caseworker asked endless questions. Where do you work? Who watches your son? Have you ever been late picking him up? Rosa answered, voice calm, though her hands shook behind her back. When the woman finally left, promising to be in touch, Rosa collapsed onto the couch. She buried her face in her hands, the exhaustion crushing her. Nico sat next to her, resting his head on her shoulder. You're the best mama, he whispered. Tears spilled over. She pulled him close. I'm trying, baby. I'm trying so hard. In the days that followed, Rosa went through the motions, but inside, she was unraveling. Every shift at the warehouse felt heavier. Every conversation felt like someone might be testing her. Rumors spread faster now, that she was under investigation, that she was in trouble. She felt the old shame tighten its grip, reminding her how society loved to watch people like her fail. One afternoon, Jason found her alone in the break room, staring at the vending machine without seeing it. Rosa, he said softly, you look like you haven't slept. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sleep is a luxury. He sat across from her, searching her face. Talk to me. She shook her head. They might take him, Jason. They might actually take him away. The words broke free before she could stop them. Jason's eyes widened, and he reached across the table, taking her hands. I won't let that happen, he promised. You are a good mother, Rosa. No one who's seen you with him could say otherwise. His voice was so certain it nearly broke her. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But the system was bigger than Jason, bigger than her. It had crushed stronger people for less. Over the next week, Rosa tried to live as perfectly as possible. She triple-checked lunches, never missed a shift, kept the apartment spotless. She kept Nico close, reading to him every night, terrified each hug might be the last. And every day, the resentment grew. Why did she have to perform this dance of perfection when others made mistakes and were forgiven? Why was her humanity always on trial? One Friday, the phone rang again. Rosa's heart stopped, then pounded so hard she thought she'd faint. Ms. Martinez, the voice said, this is Officer Daniels. We're closing the report. No further action. Rosa nearly dropped the phone. Thank you, she whispered, the words dry in her throat. After hanging up, she slid to the floor, sobbing. Nico crawled into her lap, wrapping his arms around her. They stayed like that for a long time, breathing together, two survivors in a world determined to break them. The next day at work, something shifted. Jason approached her with an idea, to formalize a small emergency childcare center right on site, to protect parents who got stuck like Rosa had. He wanted her to help design it. Rosa felt her breath catch. A chance to build something bigger, to change things, not just for her but for others. For once, she felt not like a burden, but like a leader. Are you sure? She asked. Jason nodded. No one understands this better than you. She swallowed, heart pounding. Okay. I'll help. In that moment, the warehouse didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a place where something might grow. Rosa still carried the scars, the years of quiet anger, the lessons that she could never let go of. But she stood taller now. She was more than a worker. More than a mother. She was a voice, and that voice finally had a place to speak. And if you ever wondered whether one person's courage could light up a whole world, remember Rosa's name. Because her fight isn't over, and neither is yours. Subscribe for more stories of everyday heroes who refuse to disappear.